Hello and welcome to the next masterclass of the BBC's 100 Women. I'm Nuala McGovern and very happy to have your company. Let me introduce, however, my guests that are joining us for our first ever digital BBC 100 Women. Coming up on your screen, we have Simone Genessen. She is the author of Sheconomics. That is a financial guide written for women by women. You're so welcome, Simone. Great to have you with us. Besides Simone, we have Nimi Akinkube, who is from Lagos, Nigeria. Maybe you've come across Money Matters with Nimi. I have been watching it over the past few days. Lots of great practical advice there as well. And we also have Tori Dunlap. Now, Tori is in the United States, and when I use the line, Tori, which I know you've written about and talked about extensively, that you made your first 100,000 US dollars before the age of 25, they're like, what? So we want to find out exactly how you did that, and also some practical tips for those of us, even that are happy to get to a lower figure, on what that might look like. So you're all so welcome to the BBC's 100 Women. We also have with us, and we're very excited, we have our illustrator extraordinaire, that is Gyula Dasmulci, joining us. There's Gyula. Hi, lovely to have you with us. And that screen that you see, she's going to be iconizing, she's visualizing some of these themes, tips, ideas that are coming to fruition during this masterclass. So Gyula, great to have you with us as well. I'm really excited to see what it is that comes up to help us move forward and having more money in our pocket. Right, when we start a conversation about women and money, we do talk about the gender pay gap. And there has been progress made in some areas to get equal pay for each gender. But I just want to quote this. This is from the World Economic Forum. It says it will take 257 years before women across the world get equal pay. Let me start with you, Tori. Hearing 257 years, how does that make you feel?
I hear that stat all the time, and still every time it hits me in the gut of just, oh, that's a long time. And I think here in the United States, it's 78 cents to a man's dollar on average, even worse if you're a woman of color. And so there has been so much progress that we've made in terms of equal pay and equal opportunities when it comes to, women and money, being able to, have your own credit cards here in the US and other things like that. But there are so many more steps that we need to take, not only for us here in the States, but across the world in terms of financial literacy, financial education, and financial equality for women. And so, yeah, I hear that stat, and I know the stat off the top of my head, but every time I hear it, it's like a punch in the gut, a reminder that there is so much work still to be done in terms of financial equality for women.
Okay, well, we're going to do some of the work over this next hour. And I do want to say to people that are watching, we want your questions. We want you to get involved. There's lots of ways to do that. We've got Twitter, BBC 100 Women, also on Facebook and Instagram. On YouTube, it's the BBC World Service YouTube channel. We get them in there and get them in fast so I can try and turn them around and put them to our experts who are here with you. I want to turn to you, Simone. Fascinating when you talk about our relationship to money, what emotions get involved. What should we be thinking about as we try to become more financially literate and educated?
Yeah, I think we each have a relationship to money, and we don't talk about it. So we have many of us have deep shame and fear and guilt in relation to money, and it's still one of the kind of remaining taboos. And so my mission really is to get people to talk about, first of all, identify with themselves about their own relationship to money. What's getting in the way? What are all the what's the hardwired messages that we have around money from our economic upbringing, from the experiences we've had growing up, from the culture that we've grown up in. All of that, all the messages we've had will determine the way that we think and feel around money. And that will determine, that's underneath the surface, and that will determine how much we earn, how how we do financially, whether we build financial resilience or whether we hijack our own success. Some of these things are hidden and way beneath the surface, and that's what I want to help people kind of really think about today as well. Like, what's going on beneath the surface? How are you managing your own relationship to money in order to get the results that you're looking for?
You know, you made me chuckle, Simone, when I was watching one of your lectures. You said we're more likely to talk about our sex lives than we are about our financial well-being, shall we say. And do you think there's a difference when it comes to women's emotional relationship with money as opposed to men's?
Well, I think the other aspect of our relationship to money is that we use money as a way of regulating our emotions. So we can spend, if you think kind of retail therapy, we spend to help ourselves feel better. So I think both men and women have to think about that. But us as women, perhaps let's think about how we may get a dopamine hit from spending money and how we can find other ways, like nurturing the emotion behind that. What else could we do in order to give us that fix? But I think, you know, we're so behind with financial resilience compared to men. We have we don't have the same kind of financial strength and money behind us, and so we've got to work towards changing that.
So, what would you say, Simone, just very briefly, how would you describe that resilience? What do you mean by that? And just give us a couple of tips of how we can strengthen it.
Well, I think we don't necessarily have anywhere near the same level of savings. We sometimes rely on our partner to build up the financial stability within the relationship, and we don't necessarily take the control ourselves. So one thing is not leaving it to somebody else. So if you are in a relationship, try to also get involved in the financial decision making, not just the short term managing money, but also the long term, the savings for your future. Think of your future financial self and make sure that you're looking after her just as much as you are as your current self. So one would be thinking about your future self and taking action, small steps around kind of building that financial resilience for yourself.
Can you give me one step just for now? I will come back to more.
Yeah, I think one tip would be to pay yourself first. So treat yourself like the most important spending category, so that you're saving money on a regular basis that becomes your priority above all the other direct debits and other things that you normally would prioritize.
It's a good one. Let me bring in Nimi. Nimi, great to have you with us as well. I just want to pick up on some of those points that Simone is making there as well. The importance of, I suppose, the relationship, right, with the partner. There are many times when women are left out of financial decisions or need to try and get in there to be able to have a say. And also Simone's advice about putting yourself first. So many women do so much unpaid work, let's be honest, in and outside the home.
Yes, for a start, where I'm from is a very largely patriarchal society, where women have just traditionally relegated all sense of responsibility for their finances from their father to their brothers to the men in their lives. So that's been quite a challenge, trying to get women to take responsibility for this very critical part of their lives, and this is what we're doing every single day. Just because what tends to happen is it's only in time of a shocking situation, sort of like a illness of their partner or death or divorce, that they suddenly find they have to take charge of their finances. So it's about every day realizing that, you've got to stand in the gap for yourself and ensure that you build that financial security bit by bit. It comes from being sure. Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, Animi, sorry for interrupting you, but to build that financial security for somebody in that situation you're talking about, that's in a patriarchal society, that decisions have been made for them, what
Yeah.
would be that first way to kind of break through that?
I think nothing beats communication. It's a difficult conversation. So a lot of women that I speak to are telling me that, oh, how do you start the conversation? So I'm always, talking to younger women before they get married. That money conversation should start even before the wedding. You find a lot of couples spending all their time talking about the wedding day, and no one talks about the life after, even though the financial issues become one of the most overbearing issues in a marriage. So it's about talking about it, being involved, having joint goals. I found that couples that are, building those goals together, short, medium, and long term, tend to work together towards the goals. But either party, even if you're not the primary breadwinner, you need to be involved in the decision making so that you just know what's going on with the major things that involve the family finances.
So really important, the partner that you choose for more reasons than one. I think a lot of things come down to that when we talk about gender equality. And let me turn to you, Tori. So we're talking about financial independence. It was something you were able to achieve as a young woman. But I was thinking, when you were able to earn 100,000 before the time you reached 25, or by the time you reached 25, you had some really well-paying jobs, I think it's probably fair to say. And I'm wondering, if somebody is perhaps not in that corporate job that pays that salary, what advice would you give?
Yeah, my 100K goal was actually not earning 100K. It was actually having 100K saved at 25. So I was making, still a really good salary here in the United States. I was making anywhere from 55,000 to about 70,000 a year. And I think that it's less about, of course, it's about how much you're making, but it is about good financial habits. So even if you're not making this larger salary, it's about getting good financial habits now. So I love Simone's advice about paying yourself first. That's the big thing I tell my clients, is make sure that you are thinking of yourself and your future self as almost a bill that you're paying. So in addition to your rent, in addition to, your expenses, your daily expenses of life, think about saving money and having an automatic transfer of money from a checking account into a savings account, or into some way that you can start building that financial stability. And that's my first tip for anybody, is really make sure that not only are you paying yourself first, but you're making it super easy for yourself to save money. You can set it up on autopilot, and that way you can have your money going into savings without you even having to think about it.
I think the savings is really interesting, Tori, and I want to throw that out to our other guests as well, because I was speaking to a few young women preparing for our masterclass, and a number of them said to me, and let me turn back to you, Simone, I'm just not earning enough to save any money.
Yeah, I think there are always ways of cutting back some expenses. There's two aspects of this. There's the expenses side of it, and of course the income side of it. So the question would be, are there any ways of generating a little bit more income? Are there ways of perhaps selling clothes that you don't wear, or turning a hobby into something that you can make some money out of? So are there ways of generating anything more? Are there any government benefits that you're entitled to, or anything like that? Are there ways of generating more income? And also at the same time, are there ways of cutting back on any expenses? So I think in a way, the pandemic has taught us around some areas that were a must-have expense. Now we've had to manage without going out, without having a cleaner, without having some of the expenses that we may have otherwise been part of our budget. We're now seeing that we can actually manage without. So little savings, and I would really emphasize this little step. So slight edge approach, ever so slightly different action. So doing some things towards a change, as opposed to we get into also lots of habits that are not so good for us. And over a period of time, that makes a big impact. So if we can find some small steps, small actions we can take, small expenses that we can cut back on, maybe that's food, maybe that's clothes, maybe that's entertainment, maybe, but any slight amount, and getting into the habit of saving, particularly if we've never saved before, just trying a very tiny amount to start saving on a regular basis to get you into that savings habit.
Thank you for that, Simone. And let me turn back to Nimi again, because I know you've talked about this and thought about this, Nimi, which is the side hustle, right? And how we should balance that with our regular job if we're trying to become more resilient, the word that Simone used, or financially independent.
I think the side hustle has become more important than ever, and there are so many people, especially those with very, very low incomes, who really have got to find a way to earn from other, multiple sources, without losing their primary job, mind you, because sometimes you end up getting overwhelmed with that side hustle and you end up getting fired from the main job. So we've got to be sure that women understand about the issues of conflict of interest and taking out of your boss's time. But I love what Simone said about your talents. The pandemic has sort of opened up a whole new, the time we just thought we never had. Some of those hobbies and talents and passions that you had that have become earning opportunities. This is the time to really invest in ourselves and try to see if there are things that we can do to earn additional income. I've got a lovely girl who helps me part-time cleaning. And every so often, for seasonal opportunities, she sells baby clothes. So she borrows from me and invests in these things and then sells and makes a profit. She's done that for Christmas. Now she pays back every single time, dead on time. So she's actually a pleasure to lend to. So people have got to realize that you might not always have the money, but if you've got the character and credibility, you can attract some funding to help your side hustle along. And I think that's a really key way to be able to earn additional funds to support your family.
I think as well, we're talking about this year that has been so unusual in so many ways, a lot of financial hardship for people as well, but also people getting so creative and innovative with the way that they live their lives, the way that they make money. I want to, Tori, come back to you. We just got to, and if I'm looking down, I don't mean to be rude, it's because we are getting comments and questions in. So that's what I'm doing as I take a look at my phone. I'm not scrolling through anything else. This is from Clara Fernandez, and she got in touch from Argentina, and she says, this is on Facebook, which you can also comment there, for BBC 100 Women. What advice would you give to women living in inflation affected countries? I live in Argentina. It's so hard to plan ahead. You can imagine.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I would actually love to hear my fellow panelists' perspective on this. But I think that the biggest way to, plan for any, inflation, financial emergencies, anything like that, is to focus on an emergency fund first. So making sure that you have something in savings so that you can, take care of yourself should something happen. And also in terms of inflation, one of the best ways to beat inflation is to invest. And so we hear about investing a lot, and we think, oh, individual stocks, right? We need to invest in individual stocks. And I don't know the retirement account plans off the top of my head for Argentina, but I know here in the States, one of the best ways to invest is through tax advantage retirement accounts like a 401k or an IRA. And so if you're in Argentina, or if you're in any state and you have access to, the internet or to Wi-Fi, or if you're in any other country, you can simply Google retirement accounts and then your country to see what options are available. And that's a great way to beat inflation, is to start investing, even if it's just a small amount every month.
Tori, just as you're speaking to us there about investments versus savings, shall we say. We got this question. This is from Abby Kay, watching on YouTube. Hi, Abby. Good to have you with us. She says, is it enough for me to save in a bank account, or does it need to be in the form of some investment? I'll get a quick response from you, Tori, and then I'll turn to our other panelists.
Thank you, Abby, for asking this. We see this in many, many women, and I see this in many clients is that, okay, if you are saving money, amazing, but they hoard it all into savings. And they say, okay, I don't want to risk it potentially. I want to be able to see all my money. And so any short-term goals should be in a savings account. So again, your emergency fund, any short-term goals you're saving for, but really try to invest. You have to invest. If you don't invest, we won't be able to retire. We won't be able to build long-term wealth. And that's actually a problem that we don't talk about enough is that we have a wage gap. But we also have an investing gap. Women either wait longer to invest compared to men or don't invest at all. So it is really important to have money, of course, for savings and for short-term goals, but to really make sure that you're investing and that you're building that long-term wealth rather than just keeping all of your money in a savings account.
Thanks very much, Tori, for that. Really good advice. Nimi, would you like to chime in?
Yes, it's so important, and Tori is spot on about that. Too many women are not thinking about investing for the long term, and a lot of it has to do with setting goals. I just find too many people are just wandering through life without set goals. I must own my own home by X. I want to set up my own business, my children's education, whatever it is. And the only way to achieve those goals and retire with some comfort is to actually invest. So we've just got to encourage them more and more in everything that we're all doing every day to make sure that people realize saving and investing are two completely different things. We do need the short-term savings because the emergencies, the unemployment, all these things will happen. But that is not going to take you down the road to financial security. That's going to come from investing in funds, in stocks, and in property and so on. So that's so important.
Thank you for that. Another question coming in. This is John Wilkinson. Glad to have the lads with us as well as we do our 100 Women series, our first ever digital version of events. He asked on Facebook, if there was one book on financial freedom that you would recommend, what would it be? Simone, you can also mention yours.
So my book is Sheconomics. It's the messages are the same for men as they are for women. We've just written a book that is more female friendly, if you like. So it's not full of jargon and facts, and it's emotionally driven. The book around the theme we've just been talking about. My panelists have just been talking about the moving away from savings into investing for long-term security. There's a book called The Simple Path to Wealth, which talks about the simplicity of investing in funds. And it's a US book. I can't remember the author's name, I'm afraid, but it's
J.L.
a US
Collins.
book, but it's J.M. Collins. But the themes will be identical for anywhere that we live.
Thank you for that. Shall we pop over to my colleague, Gyula Dalsmulci, to find out exactly how she is visualizing what we have been speaking about? Let us take a look. She is our illustrator extraordinaire. I am leaning in to have a look at the board as well. Okay, so we have talking, of course, about money. We have investing to beat inflation, the savings for the short-term goals, the elephant in the room. Oh, I like that. And the number 257 that we talked about as well, the years that it would take for gender equality. A bit of a sad figure, that one, of course. The side hustle, yes, lots of information coming in there, but be sure to keep your first job still, of course, eyes on the prize as you work to kind of figure out a way that perhaps you could make some more money as well and start thinking and planning for your financial future. I love them. It's quite something, isn't it, ladies, to kind of see your ideas and what we're talking about here, the tips in this masterclass for your money matters coming into lovely illustrations by my colleague Gyula. People are getting in touch at the BBC 100 Women Facebook page. If you want to join us there, that's great. You can also do it, of course, Instagram and Twitter. We are keeping across all of it. We're going to go back to Gyula in just a few moments as well. But I want to move on with my guests. Tori, I want to turn to you. Like I thought 25 was young to make your first 100,000. But I think you were just 9 when you began thinking with a business head. Talk us through a little bit about that.
I love that you brought that up. I don't know if you can see it in the background or it's this side, but this is actually me on the day I sold my business after 11 years to a 10-year-old who also happens to be named Tori. So I actually started my first business, you're exactly right, when I was 9 years old. I owned vending machines, the type where you put a quarter in, you get a handful of candy out, the kind of gumball machines. And it was in no way novel. I didn't invent anything. I didn't magically find a new invention, but I learned how to start a business. I learned how to pitch myself. I learned how to manage my money. I had my first checking account and savings account when I was 10 years old, and then all the profits went to my college fund. So it wasn't a ton of money, but it was quarter vending machines, but it was all a great learning lesson in how to manage my money, how to be a business owner, even at age 9. So, yeah, after 11 years, I sold that business to a 10-year-old who also happens to be named Tori, because that's how this crazy world works. So that photo behind me is actually the day I sold that business. And I don't know if you can see it, but she actually
We
looks like
can.
me. That's the really crazy part, is like we almost could be sisters. And so what's so cool about that is like my parents fostered in me this importance of a financial education, but also the importance of entrepreneurship. And then I got to pass that down to another girl who's now in high school and owns her own business.
Thank you so much, Tori, for that. And indeed, we can see that photograph and delighted to see it's kind of paying it forward, I guess. But let me turn to you, Simone. So you here there with Tori, she listed some of the lessons that she learned at that point. Do you feel that women come to you with the same amount of financial knowledge as men? Is there a difference?
No, I mean, I think we haven't all had that. That's a fantastic story, and I love how you were so entrepreneurial at such a young age. But I think that's sadly kind of not the experience for many people.
Yeah.
Not having, having that chance of delivering something on their own and learning those lessons at a young age. For most of us, we're observing things from our family upbringing, perhaps that aren't necessarily helpful. So many people, they might be in a family which is there's conflict about money, there's arguments around money, and they're witnessing that and grow up kind of believing that money is a cause of conflict and confusion, and all those messages that we, by observation, where no one is telling us, we're kind of just getting that sense ourselves, and we may grow up believing all those things, believing that money is a cause of tension, believing that money is complicated. We've seen all those things going on in our childhood, and that they're kind of like glass walls. We form beliefs around those kind of things when. But they're glass, so we only know we've got them when we bump up against them. So that's the type of thing that we probably want to look inside ourselves and see what beliefs that we hold and whether they're serving us.
And I suppose coming back to practical advice, Simone, and tips then, how do you dismantle or smash through that glass wall? I mean, I think it takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to unpick the emotional reactions we have with money or relationship we have to money.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all we've got to look at the results we're getting, and it may be that at some level there is something underneath the surface that's kind of causing that, particularly around kind of mismanaging money and spending more than you've got coming in and getting into debt, that kind of thing. So of course there may well be practical reasons why we're in that situation, but if you know that you're getting in the way, then it's worth kind of looking at what might be those messages. What beliefs maybe I have formed myself around money, and what am I doing to reinforce those beliefs? So that's the irony, is that we we're taking action to reinforce those very beliefs that we don't want to have. So I would look there and then say, well, actually, what do I want? What do I want? What belief do I want to have? So if we take Tori's belief that perhaps she grew up believing that it's easy to make money. Let's think about that. Money comes to me easily and effortlessly. Let's say that were your belief. What would you need to do to reinforce that belief? So what action could you take? And perhaps that's where you might build a plan to pay down debt. You might build up a small savings goal. So the small actions you can take will reinforce the beliefs that you want to have.
Really interesting. Tori, what about that? I'm just thinking, going back to you as a kid, all through your teenage years as well, what lesson do you think could be useful for women to think about today? Like what area was most helpful to you, perhaps in those early years, to start having financial freedom?
Yeah, I am fully aware that the financial education I had from my parents is not normal. And that's part of why I do what I do, because the privilege of that financial education utterly transformed my life. And so with that privilege comes now a responsibility for me. And that's why I founded Her First 100K. So one of the things I have clients do, and I love Simone's perspective on this, is like thinking through, yeah, what are your hangups around money? What is keeping you from, potentially progressing in your money journey? And a really specific actionable tip is to journal about your first money memory. So what is the first time you remember thinking about money? For me, it was saving money to go to Annie the musical, because I'm a theater nerd, and was saving pennies in like a little tin in order to go. And that was a great reminder for me now, looking on my money. Oh, I learned the importance of saving. I learned that if I wanted something, I would need to save money in order to get it. For some of my clients, that's a really great memory, and maybe not so great of a memory. Maybe it's the first time you saw your parents fight about money, or not growing up with access to money or access to, disposable income. So for anybody watching, write down what your first money memory looked like, and that might inform a lot of your money habits now. The statistic is actually the majority of our money habits are cemented by age 7, which is really, really early. And so if you can start unpacking a lot of the perspective you have around money that maybe started when you were younger, that might unveil some revelations about how you manage money now as an adult.
Oh my goodness, Tori. Of course, I have to think about it right now. And I'm thinking my first memory was going to visit Santa Claus and getting a lucky bag for 5p, and just thought, I was like, got to get 5p to be able to have this lucky bag. So I don't know. Somebody can unpick that other than me, perhaps psychologically. But Mimi, what about you? What would you like to add?
Just to add that it's just so critical for parents, guardians, to just begin to put that financial education in. The transformation is just incredible. I was a banker for 23 years, and we used to bring our clients' children to the bank to talk about money, because many of them were going to inherit and didn't have any idea about money, with nothing in the school curriculum. What we're doing in Lagos now, which is so exciting, is where we set up financial literacy clubs as an extracurricular activity. And it's just taken on a life of its own. It's just so exciting, because the kids, and these are in low income schools as well. So even the children who are earning the least, most of them actually don't get any pocket money from their parents. After school, they're trading, they're doing little things to get money, and they're beginning to save. So it's just what Tori and Simone have been saying. It's incredible what you can achieve if children are introduced to money, sound money habits from their earliest years. And you can imagine if we all knew what we know now when we were teenagers or younger. It's incredible what you can achieve, because you have that gift of time. So that's been something that's very exciting, and we're hoping to roll those out, across all the schools.
There's a couple of things there, Nimi, that strike me as you're speaking to me, and perhaps I'll throw this back in the court of Simone again. Parents, what should they be thinking about as they have these conversations with their kids to try and start off on a more, what would I say, open, more educational path towards financial literacy?
Well, what we've been telling a lot of parents is just start with an allowance. I had pocket money. It really helped. Some parents are completely against that. They feel children should work for money and not just be entitled and given something. Some people pay something for chores or jobs that they wouldn't ordinarily be doing around the house. Just let them have a bit of money, start up their own business and earn vacation jobs, little things that are child at the right appropriate age appropriate activities. So they begin to earn their own money. What I found with my children was the minute they had to work for the money that they earned, it changed their whole perspective of how they spent it. I thought that was fascinating because if I just gave them money, they didn't really think about how it went. They just printed it away. But when it was money that they worked for, there was a different mindset about earning your hard work that, and then what you do with the money afterwards. So I think that should be encouraged as early as possible. But of course, ultimately, we just have to get financial education into the school curriculum across the world. It's just critical for global economies, for people to know how to manage money. In our part of the world, there's a major problem with unemployment. So a lot of young people leave school and there are no jobs. So they're forced to set up their own businesses. They have the most incredible ideas, but of course the majority don't succeed because of lack of financial knowledge and not being able to move the business forward.
I mean, it is really quite something that we haven't had financial literacy or resilience, call it what you want, within the curriculum in schools across the world. I think sometimes it can also be considered a dirty word, money, even to talk about it among friends or family. We can talk about that. But I want to bring in some of the questions that are coming from our audience. I'm going to throw this one to you, Simone. Katie Jackson watching on YouTube in London. Hi, Katie. Good to have you with us. Relating to investments, how should we go about investing ethically in companies that are environmentally responsible or protect their workers, etc.? I suppose like trying to figure out, exactly what might be an investment that is suited to your values.
Yeah, so the best way of getting into investing is to start with funds where you're investing in not just one company, but in perhaps a fund that in turn invests in maybe 400 different companies, that kind of thing. So there are ethical funds. Depending, I can't quote what they might be in different geographical locations, but if you search for socially responsible or ethical funds, you should see a range of funds to choose from. There's a narrower range, and then there's also different shades of green. So some will be positively engaging in companies that help the environment, for instance, or have good human rights policies, that kind of thing. And some will be anti things like armaments or tobacco. So look at the different shades of green and specifically aim for the funds that would suit your profile.
Thanks so much for that, Simone, and I hope that's helpful for you, Katie, as well. Right, here's another comment coming into us on YouTube. One of the ways you can get in touch with us here on the BBC 100 Women. How do you feel about wants versus needs in relation to money? This has always been a good guide for me. Tori, what would you like to respond?
Yeah, I love this. I think it's really important when you are figuring out any sort of budget or savings plan is to determine what is a want versus a need. And I think for me, I really focus on what I call a three bucket budget, excuse me. And so the first bucket is all of your necessary expenses. So everything you need to eat, sleep, breathe, move, and live, the things that are absolutely necessary to your life. Bucket number 2 is your goals, things like debt payoff, saving, investing. And then bucket number 3 is your fun bucket. So that's your wants bucket. And so being able to distinguish between what is a want, what is a need, and what are my goals is really helpful and an easy way to start tracking your money. And one of the things I realized with so many clients is that the ostrich effect is real. The ostrich effect is where we bury our head in the sand and we act like our money problems don't exist, right? We don't look at our credit card statements. We don't look at our bank account balance. We just kind of go through life and just hope everything financially works out. And of course, that's really detrimental to our financial lives. And so when you're figuring out your wants and your needs, you're going to have to kind of go in and get really comfortable being uncomfortable with your money. And that's a great way to, start figuring out, where is your money going exactly? Is it going more towards your wants than to your needs? Is it going more towards things that are discretionary rather than your goals like paying off debt or investing? And you can start getting a plan together by getting really honest with yourself about, where's your money going, what's in what bucket, what's in what category, and then making a plan from there.
Just very briefly, Tori, before I turn to Gilles, you talk about there figuring out where your money is going. Do you have a preferred way for knowing how to do that?
I love this question. Yeah, I call it a money diary. There's been a bunch of different platforms. Refinery29 here in the United States kind of made that concept famous. But I have clients track everything that they spend money on for a period of time. It's kind of like a food diary. So you're saying, okay, I went to the grocery store and I spent this amount of money. And you go 2 steps further, actually, and describe why you made the purchase and how it made you feel. So you're saying what did you buy? How much did it cost? Why did you make the purchase? And how did it make you feel? And this is a great way to not only see exactly where your money's going, to your point, but also to figure out the psychological barriers around that purchase. Are you spending your money on things that you actually like and things that actually bring you joy? Or are you spending money on things that you maybe don't care about as much and that can be cut from your spending habits?
Really interesting. I think this year, as also we were hearing from our panelists, maybe it's made us rethink about, what do we spend our money on, or what are our wants, or what are our needs?
Yeah.
Let me bring in my colleague, illustrator extraordinaire, Gilles Dasmulchi, who's been taking a look at, or really creating for us to look at, how she is visualizing the conversations, the tips, the practical advice coming from this masterclass on managing your money. Gilles, what struck you?
Lots of things which I sadly couldn't capture, but the things that really struck me were our emotional well-being being attached to how we spend money, which I've tried to capture here, and how reassessing that will help us, as Simone mentioned, budget and manage our finances in much savvier way. And then the drum roll moment for me was when Tori said, pay yourself first. Women forget about themselves. And also to start savings very early through a direct debit. Simone adding to that by saying small savings will grow bigger like acorns. And what people should think about, what they can cut. Is it entertainment? Is it that extra money that you spend that you don't need to? And then Nimi's side hustle, the thing that struck me was how easily people can monetize their hobby, but shouldn't take unnecessary risks and leave their jobs. And then with Tori and how to beat inflation, one of the key elements was not to put all your saving eggs in one basket, and that savings are good for short-term goals, investments for long-term. And this part of the conversation about childhood, I wish I had that education early on. Money was a dirty topic in my family. So Simone adding about how we look at money is very important, and how if we have an emotional understanding that money means tension, people don't reevaluate those beliefs, and they should. And one final comment about Tori saying, think about your first money memory and reassess your relationship with it. And with a combination of all our panelists talking about the parents' responsibility to teach kids how to budget, how to save for any favors, and also literacy. Thank you.
Thanks, Gilles. I love kind of having that recap in visualization. I'm sure our panelists do as well, of exactly what it is. That might be some tips that you can take into your day-to-day life. Nimi, I want to turn back to you. It was something actually that Tori mentioned as well. You know, trying to reduce your debt, because what I'd like to get into with you, Nimi, are women who are struggling to make ends meet. And perhaps it's not just starting with this blank slate, but they have debts perhaps already incurred. And so how to try and, find their way out of that, perhaps even in a patriarchal society, as you're mentioning at the beginning of this session. What would you say
So
to a
there's
woman that finds herself in that predicament?
there really is no magic formula. It's about either earning more or reducing your expenses. So they've got to do a bit of both. Now, there's a very interesting phenomenon across Africa. It's the revolving credit associations. Many women, especially the lower income women, don't have access to credit. So they have little groups, community groups, where maybe 10 women come together or more, and everyone puts money into a kitty, and every month it's handed to one person. A lot of women use that pool of bulk money to help to pay off their debts. That's one way. But what is quite extraordinary is just the level of innovation and creativity. They're doing multiple tasks and trying to earn extra money. And from all reports, they do settle their debt on time. They're very, very responsible with community borrowing because everyone knows everyone else. It really seems to work. But people just need to realize that, borrowing for the right reasons. They've got to be borrowing for things that will appreciate in value or to improve themselves, and not borrow for things that are just not what you should be doing. We have a culture of weddings and funerals that can be excessive in terms of cost, even for the poorest families. So there's a lot of societal pressure. We've got to try our best to not get dragged into that. And that's where having goals that you're working towards to bring you out of that poverty situation come into play, and not to be sidetracked by what societal expectations are.
Thanks so much for that, Nimi. And, I think what I'm really taking away from this is we need to stop and look and think exactly about our relationship with money, and some ways then to put in some of these practical aspects you're talking about. You're talking about savings, debt reduction, a way to increase your income, think about the side hustle, lots of really great stuff there. I also want to say that, Gilles, we were looking at the visualizations. I hope my guests enjoyed seeing their ideas being iconized. We're going to be putting them up on our social media feeds as well, which is Instagram and on Twitter, on Facebook, and we're also on the BBC World Service YouTube channel as well. So I want to thank my guests that are all on your screens. Simone Gnessen, also we had Nimi Akinkube, and also Tori Dunlap, and who is still illustrating there is Gilles Das Mulchi.